From the studios of KENW on the campus of Eastern New Mexico University, it's You Should Know, featuring the people and events of Eastern New Mexico and West Texas.
Welcome to You Should Know. I'm your host, Evelyn Ledbetter, and my guest today is the mayor of the city of Clovis, Mike Morse. Mike, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
For sure. So, ice on the roads this morning, or was it pretty good?
A couple of icy spots, but not too bad.
Not too bad.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, Mike, I have never actually met you in person, so we've talked on the phone once, I think, and obviously have read articles and things, but tell me, I don't know much about you, and I don't know that our viewers do either, so were you raised in this area?
I was raised out on a cattle ranch out by Conchas Dam,
Okay.
and that my mom and dad worked for a big ranch there, and actually went through kindergarten through 6th grade in a one-room school at Conchas Dam.
Oh, how
And,
fun is that?
yeah, so sort of a little house on the prairie kind of thought there, but
What was the name of the school?
Conchas Dam Elementary.
Really?
Yeah.
I had never heard of that.
Yeah, little one-room school. At the time, part of the West Las Vegas school district,
Huh.
and I think there were 13 kids in the whole school. There were 3 of us in my grade, and so I'm just this kind of ranch kid that moved to town. I still tell my wife that's how I think of myself. I tell her, and she says, "Oh no, you're a city boy." And I said, "No, I feel like I'm a ranch kid still. I just moved to town." But raised out there, went through, as I say, Conchas in elementary, went through Tucumcari schools for junior high and high school.
So even that, going from a little ranch place to going to a school that's on the interstate,
right?
That's a big adjustment in itself.
Oh, it was, yeah. I was a pretty introverted, shy kid, and hit 7th grade in Tucumcari, and I think there were 150 kids in 7th grade in Tucumcari back then, but I wanted to play football, and so that's why I chose to go to school in Tucumcari versus Roy, which would have also worked from our location out there. And the friends I made were all the sons of truck drivers. There were 3 different trucking companies that had terminals in Tucumcari back then, and sons of railroaders and different industries that I had the opportunity now looking back to kind of see what happened to that community where my family still lives, and I have such a heart for Tucumcari. But while I was going through junior high and high school, I saw that town really go backwards, and all those friends I made in 7th grade on the football team were gone by the time we were sophomores, because all those industries were gone.
Well, it changed so much with Route 66 not being what went through town anymore in that interstate. Just a whole different world.
Right.
Adjustment.
So after high school and all the things that I did in Tucumcari with athletics and the jobs that I had and all those kinds of things, I moved off to Amarillo for a time.
Okay.
I should mention I met my wife when we were in 7th grade in Tucumcari, and she went to school at West Texas A&M and always knew she was going to be a teacher. So got her bachelor's degree in order to be a teacher, and I worked and supported her with that, and we were making life in Amarillo, although I think the Lord had a different plan for us. And I worked for a number of years while working in other jobs. I worked on becoming an insurance agent, and finally got that opportunity and the opportunity to have my own insurance agency.
Very nice.
In 2005. That opportunity materialized, and it was in Clovis.
In Clovis.
And so we were excited we're New Mexicans, to be moving back to New Mexico. And while there's a lot of familiarity in doing that, we also had the opportunity to experience being new in Clovis.
That's true.
At one time there. And so it was a little over 18 years ago now that Sarah and I, and at the time our baby boy, moved to Clovis and embarked on the life that the Lord had planned for us. And it's been wonderful. We fell in love with the Clovis and Cannon community immediately, and and just really felt like this is where we were supposed to be. And we've tried to serve well and bloom where we've been planted.
So it felt like home when you got here in a
It
way.
absolutely did.
And by this time, by far.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
so you actually you have the State Farm Agency.
That's
So,
right. Yeah.
yeah. Jim Harmon was our agent for ages here in
Oh,
Portales. So
never had the chance to meet him, but
yeah.
have just heard wonderful things about him
Well, good.
and his career and the way he served this community.
So
Yeah.
added, you've got one son, and you said he's actually going to school here at Eastern now.
Yeah, he's here at Eastern studying business.
Very nice.
He's 19, Clovis High graduate, and he's doing well. We're proud of him. We have a daughter that's 16. She's kind of a young junior in high school, Clovis High kid, although she's attending the early college program at Clovis
nice.
Community College.
Great.
Yeah,
Great. Lots of opportunities to get that dual enrollment and get going.
Yeah, it's an amazing program that CCC and the high school have made available to kids in Clovis. We're real proud that she gets to be in it.
And our towns, I mean, we love the small town, but they can also be a challenge for businesses as well.
Right.
Have you found that in the insurance business and everywhere else, I would think?
Sure. You know, I opened my agency in 2006, and you know, didn't know what I was doing, and just kind of tried to do everything in the way of marketing and advertising, and again, comfortable and feeling at home, but I was new in town, and so I had to kind of crack that.
Well, you didn't have the connection to people you went to high school with or things like that that's really important. And
absolutely right. And you know, and Clovis is a close knit community of shrewd people, and you know, I had to work to demonstrate that I would be someone they could trust and do business with, and
they didn't know your dad and your great granddad, and you know, so that really plays in.
That's right. I had so many people that would, you know, they come visit with me, and they'd sort of look at me and say, "Did I go to high school with you?" You know, and I'd say, "No, I didn't go to high school here," and so it was sort of like, "Oh darn,
there's a black mark."
Yeah, darn it. But you know, over time, I just kind of kept saying yes to Clovis, and that first presented itself when my son was 3 years old, and my wife had signed him up for soccer. And at the time, I'm still a pretty new dad, you know, and I'm really focused on, we've got to get this business going. We have to provide and all those things. But I thought, you know, am I the kind of dad that do I take him to soccer? I mean, it was a silly thing to wrestle with. But I said, do I leave work and take him to practice? I want to, you know, but do I let my wife do that and I stay busy working? And I wrestled with it. It's sort of a silly decision to wrestle with, but I did. And ultimately I said, I'm taking him to practice, you know? And so I took him to practice his first day, and I am not making this up. I see a man, you know, sort of rubbing his forehead and looking at a clipboard, and some kids running around, and I walk up to him and I tell him, "This is my son. This is Zach." And he looks, he says, "Yeah, I got him on the list here." I said, "Oh, good. Got him at the right place." And this is a man I still know today, and we've never talked about this, but he sort of looked around nervously and said, "You know, I've got something I need to run do. Could you watch him for a minute?" And he handed me the clipboard. And I said, "Sure." And he never came back. And,
really? He left?
Yeah, he left. And so I knew at that moment that not only was I the take my kid to practice kind of dad, but I was the coach the team kind of dad.
Yeah.
And so I started coaching kids at that moment, and ultimately ended up coaching my son in every sport he played, and then my daughter behind him in every sport she played, until I handed him off to middle school coaches. But coached basketball, football, you know, baseball, everything. There was a time when I was coaching a little tackle football team that my son wasn't even playing on, and I kind of thought, what am I doing? I'm spending all these hours out here.
But what a great way. You didn't realize it, but if you're going to get connected into a community by the time you've went through sports and coaching, you know the majority of people in the schools and
you know,
with
that
kiddos.
Exactly. I mean, I was blessed to meet so many good friends that I have to this day, and people that I was able to connect with in a way that they know they can trust me. And, you know, and I guess all of that eventually led to, you know, well, from there it turned into civic organizations. I got invited to Clovis Rotary for lunch one day. I
Mhm.
remember that, and I was just thought, wow, I have really,
Yeah.
made it, because I've been invited to lunch with these wonderful
Right.
business leaders and
Right.
community leaders, and then they welcomed me into their club. Eventually, I was president of that club. I was on the chamber board. I've just been involved in a lot of different things, not because I was, God's gift to any of them, but just I wanted to help and wanted to serve.
You had a heart for that.
And I just sort of kept saying yes when people would ask me to do things. And, uh, in 2019, when former Mayor David Lansford had said, publicly that he would not be
Mhm.
seeking a third consecutive term at that point. Remember, he had done 3 consecutive terms with a 4-year break in
Right.
between. Um, and people started to talk about who would run and this and that. And I'd always sensed a tug
That
to some sort of service like that. And at the time just had seemingly an endless line of people whom I respected very much come to me and say, Mike, I thought you wanted to do something like this someday. I think now's the time. Would you consider
wow.
running for mayor? And I said, oh gosh, I hadn't thought about, just coming off the sideline
And jumping to the
shooting for
we're
the
not gonna
mayor's
work
office.
our way up through being a counselor or something,
But
just
it was just so real that we should consider it. So my wife and I, prayerfully and thoughtfully considered that over a several weeks period, knowing what the answer was is that we would file, but just wanted to keep our minds open and be sensitive to the Lord's leading on this. Uh, right up until, noon, the day of filing day back in January of 2020, and went down as a family and filled out the form and went on the ballot and thought, well, I'm being obedient. I'm saying yes to this opportunity. I'm on the ballot, but I might not win,
Right,
but
right.
then I won. And so
Your mind wasn't quite to that point of saying, once I kinda like applying for a job, you have to have it in your mind like,
yeah,
"I'm willing to take it if it happens."
right, right.
So, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool that you went as a family and said, "This is a commitment for
Hmm.
all of us," because your family's gonna get some of the fallout that comes from being in politics as well. So
So true. And I think about, I remember looking at the kids when we were pretty close to making the decision over dinner. I looked at my then, gosh, I don't want to get their ages wrong, but something like a 12-year-old daughter and 15-year-old son, and said, guys,
oh,
what do you think?
oh,
I feel like I need to serve the community as mayor. What are your thoughts? And of course, my daughter, she's always just been a real cheerleader for me. Oh, Dad, do it.
really?
And my son kind of goes, well, Dad, that, it seems like something you would do. So go ahead. But they had no idea what they were signing off
Yeah.
on, because they have caught some flack.
Mhm.
I think the mayor's kids in a community probably get treated either better or worse than they deserve, and
Probably
so
a little better by the adults and a little worse by the kids, I'm
maybe,
gonna guess.
yeah,
Kinda like a preacher's kid or
yeah,
anything, and, politics is tough.
it is,
So,
it is,
you
yeah,
better have a thick skin, and
yeah.
my kids made me promise them that I would never run for school board as long as they were in
Okay,
school,
right.
and which I don't have that desire, but they said, "Oh, I just don't wanna deal with what those kids deal with."
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so tell me about when you first came into Clovis, what your view overall of Clovis, what did you think were the great assets? What made you say, "Boy, this is what makes me wanna be here"?
Back in 2005, I mean, really, yeah, I was in my late 20s, and I was just really excited for the opportunity that I had in what I hoped would become my career. But as I thought about Clovis, and it's funny, I was on a flight. I was an intern with the insurance company for
Mhm.
a period before I got to open my agency, and I was on a flight home from the Tempe area where there was an operations center, and seated beside a gentleman that was chatty, and you do what you do sitting beside someone on a plane. What's your story? Where are you
Right.
going? All this kind of stuff. And this gentleman was a contractor from Albuquerque on his way home from a golf weekend in Phoenix, and he eventually gets done telling his story and says, well, what's your story? And I told him who I was, and I said, I'm working on my goal of opening and having an insurance agency in Clovis. Now, keep in mind, this was approximately December 2005. And
Okay.
if you remember, Cannon Air Force Base was on the BRAC list
Yeah,
during
that
that
was a
time.
really tough.
And that was a scary
It was.
time and a challenging time in Clovis. But this gentleman says to me when I told him that I was working on a move to Clovis and opening my agency, he says, you know, just unsolicited and in front of everyone on the plane, you know, you're nuts, man. I wouldn't go there if I were you. That place
Oh,
is dying. And I just said, you know, thanks, but I just feel like it's the right thing to do, and it's where I'm going and what I'm going to do. And what I would say is that, you know, I knew that they were on the BRAC list, or I knew that Cannon was
mhm.
on BRAC, and that, you know, the community was standing up and executing on Operation Keep Cannon. And you know, you had
Oh, it
I
was
mean,
huge.
it was just amazing.
It was
But I just
huge.
had a sense that there was great opportunity in Clovis, and I still have that sense, right? I mean, I just feel like we are a community with a great potential.
Right,
And when I don't even contain that to only Clovis. I think of us as a region, so certainly to include Portales,
right.
this university.
Mhm.
We have tremendous opportunity and potential. And I think I probably could not have said that way back in 2005, but I just knew that this was the right place to be. I wanted to be a part of how great Clovis was going to become, right? And I'm just fortunate that the community embraced me, and I've been able to make a living and raise my kids here. And you know, my wife loves serving the community. She's a first grade school teacher,
Perfect.
and you know, and now in you know, where we're at in time and in my public service role, being a part of shaping kind of where we're going, and uh, it's just an exciting time, and I'm just so blessed to have the
Well
opportunity to be involved this way.
well, and you want somebody
Yeah.
that has that enthusiasm and gusto for the community. You need that cheerleader to say
Hmm.
it's gonna be good. It's
Yeah.
all gonna be well. We're
Yeah.
gonna make it through this. We can grow and prosper. And you're self-employed,
Right.
so you know the angst that goes along. You don't have that security net of a paycheck
That's
with a
right.
government agency or something that's not gonna disappear. But
That's right. You know, for years, my wife and I and my kids, of course, they, you know, hopefully would tell you that they didn't notice, but you know, it was tough for a lot of years. But you know, I'm really proud that now, in going on 18 years in business, I've never missed a payroll. There was a lot of times
oh,
I didn't
well,
get paid,
yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, when I remember times when I had, you know, 1.5 employees, and it was hard to
Hard
pay
to
them and hard to pay the bills, but made it. And you know, today I've been able to, you know, grow the agency to the point that I get to spend nearly all of my time on public service,
isn't that
and
crazy?
and the community, you know, supports me and supports my business, and and it's another way I get to serve, you
Right,
know, and
right.
but yeah, being a business owner in Clovis, I feel like I have um, a finger on the pulse of kind of how things are going, and and things are good. You know, business is good in Clovis,
There's been a lot of growth.
yeah, you know, we see it in the form of national
We do, the chains and
chains
things that
coming to town, and I'm aware of several that are interested, that are kind of circling and looking, and it's exciting to know that, you know, when these big companies are doing their market research, they're looking at Clovis and saying, you know what,
right,
I like this. Let's go there,
right.
and that says something about us being on the right track.
You know, I think it's surprising sometimes with, a lot of your military members that do come in, and I'll get these comments like, you know, "When you get tagged to go from Florida to the special ops here at Cannon, and they
Yep.
said, "But you know what? It's a great community. It's not picturesque. You don't have lakes and oceans and a lot of attractions that way, but you have great people, and you're within 100, 200 miles of all kinds of activities and skiing and
Mhm.
great things in the state." So,
You hear hear it put this way sometimes, that people come with the base or with the Air Force, they come in kind of kicking and screaming,
uh-huh,
but they leave kicking and screaming
they do.
because by the time you've been here for 6 months or a
Mhm,
year, you fall in love with this community in this
right.
area. And it's, as you say, it's not because we have beautiful mountains and trees and rivers. It's the
It's
people.
the people, it's the community
It
itself.
it's the people that make the Clovis, Portales,
Right.
Cannon Air Force Base community such a wonderful place to live and work and serve, and that that's true, and we have evidence of that. And there's a lot
Mhm.
of folks that you and I probably know in this
Right.
area that are here because they decided to retire here
Right.
after having been stationed here at some point in their Air Force career.
Right. Or they come back. You know,
Right.
they serve out their time somewhere else and then actually come back and settle.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
so that's the good parts when you
Yeah.
came into being mayor. What was
Mhm.
the thing that was the most challenging for you?
Yeah. Well, and I like to I have a dry sense of humor, and I can be sarcastic at times, and so I guess I preface all of that, or I preface what I'm about to say in that way because um, I no kidding don't even really like to think about my first several months in office because if you remember, I was elected March 3rd, 2020. If
Mhm.
you remember what was happening during that time, it was 8 days later that the governor of New Mexico declared an emergency,
And
and
shut us down.
I took the oath. I raised my hand and took the oath the last day or two of March, took office on April 1st. And on my first day in office, I, no kidding, went to the back doors of City Hall and banged on the back doors to be let in because the building was locked
Yeah,
because we were under this shutdown because of
right.
the pandemic. And so those were
Mm.
the circumstances under which I took office. Businesses shuttered on
Wow.
our main street. Uh, Everyone reeling with what is going on, and in the next 18 months, 24 months, we're just you know
And it just
shrouded in that,
it
and
didn't stop.
it didn't stop. And so I had all of these grand ideas of how I was going to do this, that, and the other, and make all of these connections, and I couldn't even meet with anyone in person.
No.
And so I did all of my work literally from my dining table, trying to manage my personal
That's
business,
true.
but also
Right.
in adopting the new role. And there was no one that could advise me. Oh, there were a lot of folks that had some
That
advice for
had
me,
great
but
opinions.
there was no one that could advise me because no one had ever been through what we were going through.
No.
And that was true in your life. That was true in the life of
Sure.
any teacher or business owner or community member. We were all dealing with something that we had never dealt with before. And I had just assumed the office of mayor. And
It's on your
uh,
shoulders.
yeah,
Does this town do well?
and I just um, I have a stubborn focus on things, and even though that was the worst time, I mean, I think I lost 20 pounds, in 6 months, and it was just
The
the stress
pandemic
diet,
diet.
but you know, through video meetings,
Mhm.
I I networked with around the state and in Santa Fe exponentially greater than I would have because I would have been just focused at home, which I was focused at home, but had I been able to, do the things that I had planned, I would not have networked around the state and 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 learned as much as I have about the processes that take place in Santa Fe had it not been for that. And during that first year in office, actually the 2021 legislative session, which it took a better part of a year to
Mhm.
build up to it, but I had the idea, and it was really born out of the pain that I saw in businesses being closed in my first few weeks in
Oh,
office. But I wanted to incentivize retail development and expansion in Clovis. And what I found out is that the state law did not allow for that in a city our size. And so in the 2021 legislative session, we ran a bill. It was Senate Bill 49 back then, and Senator Woods sponsored it for me. And I was the expert witness in every committee via video. And we got that bill through the legislature. And so that is a shining example. It's not the only thing, but it's an example of kind of my stubborn focus
yeah.
that, hey, even though things are crazy, we're gonna keep our eye on the prize and get some things done. And I think that kind of focus through that period and the team that I have around me helping me stay focused had us in a position to come out of the pandemic stronger,
That's
right?
true. Well, the
Yeah,
phoenix burning from the ashes and coming from that, and you built that
yeah,
group to really learn.
yeah,
Oh, and then, of course, women's medical clinic closed, so the healthcare and
yeah.
so many other issues that
Hmm.
hit you as a mayor that are
Hmm.
just really, really tough.
Yeah,
So,
when we think
but
about the quality of life issues, you just hit on it.
mm,
Healthcare access is
right.
arguably a a
A
top
huge.
item when we think about quality of life. And and women's medical, you know, shutting down. I would have never dreamed that as mayor I would have um, weighed in on those kinds of things or been as you know, close to some of that as I was. But I wound up talking to the doctors of women's medical, and I just asked the question. I mean, and it was
Oh, help us.
you know, help me understand why aren't you selling your practice to a group of OBGYNs that would come in and continue it? You know, I mean, that was just a simple question that I had, and it was so telling. You know, the answer. The answer was is that practice in essence had no value because you weren't able at that time, and still it's a challenge to get OBGYNs to move to Clovis, New Mexico to work.
What's the incentive?
Yeah, what's the
Oh,
incentive? And in fact, some of the state policies actually are disincentives
they are.
in what a doctor is going to need to pay in the way of malpractice insurance premiums, which makes it hard to make a
Oh,
living, and then just some other state policies.
oh
And then
my,
you have just rural healthcare is tough.
our time is running short.
Yeah.
There is so much to cover, but I love learning about you and knowing
Mhm.
what you've done for the help that you've done for Clovis, but also, like you said, we are communities that work together. So
Mhm.
I think we could pick up and have a whole nother segment.
Absolutely.
But thank you for all your hard work for Clovis and for being my guest today. I appreciate it very
Thanks for
much.
having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to all of you guys out there, thank you for watching. We will see you next time. Cheers.